The online safety bill determination by the Supreme Court, if you can also help us understand better the nuances of how court determined constitutionality, Professor.
Thank you. That's a good question, Sonali, because when I read this Supreme Court decision, my mind went back to the great justices that we have had. Justice A.R.B. Amara Singha, the late Justice Mark Fernando, Justice Prasanna Jayapardhan, and judges today, like for example, Justice Kodagada has written a wonderful judgment on freedom of speech. Justice Janak De Silva on several judgments, including the powers of the AG. Justice Mark Fernando and on this very concept of the public trust. So this has come in early jurisprudence. Public trust has been there in early interpretation of equality. Was Mark Fernando, Justice Mark's contribution. He took equality as a formal concept and broadened it out to link it to arbitrary abuse of power. So we've had great jurisprudence, and the best jurisprudence follows that chartered course, which is what the Supreme Court has done. But I have to say, our country jurisprudence is patchy. Lawyers often argue for this analysis of rights being located in this way in democracy, etc. But sometimes they fail, and I think in the online safety bill there were many people who said foundational values of the constitution on freedom of speech, etc. had been completely destroyed, and therefore the whole bill was bad. But then what happens is sometimes courts don't they don't take that attitude. When they don't take that attitude, they don't look at it holistically as we expect them to, and then they take clause by clause. Is it constitutional? Is it not? And that is encouraged also with a procedure which is really contrary to the Constitution's concept of fundamental rights, which is the Attorney General coming to court and saying this amendment is going to be introduced, this change is going to be made, etc. And when the 20th Amendment came to court, lawyers objected to that and said, you can't do this, because you have to view it holistically, you see. But that practice now has become part of the Attorney General's Department practice too. So this is not basically the kind of jurisprudence, with all respect, we can say conforms with the real idea of constitutionalism, which is the constitution is there, fundamental interests there, the sovereignty of the people is there, in order to ensure that the state does not abuse power and acts for the well-being of the people.
What's the way forward?
That is very difficult. I've just met, before this came into this, for this interview, I met a young person who told me that all the young people are leaving the country. They're not traitors to the cause. They're not traitors to the country. They are people who are desperate because they do not see the promise of the Constitution, the promise of democracy realized. So one way is that I think the way forward is to dismantle the whole system of the Executive Presidency, which to me is something that is the foundational reason for this toxic concept of abuse of power at every level of governance. And it will continue unless you dismantle it and you go back to a parliamentary system of governance. That is one way forward. The other is that in this situation where a Supreme Court of the country has given this judgment, and they have done it, you can't talk of the lack of capacity of the court to do this, because they have gone to all the specific area with enough information. So it's not a judgment which is superficial, it's in depth, pages and pages of pages, where every part, the tax bill, the interest rates, the floating currency, floating exchange rate, all that is addressed. So if in that situation, then I think the people of the country have the right to say, you cannot govern, we want elections, both presidential and parliamentary, soon as possible. And I would conclude with this last, you quoted, Sonali, the preamble at the beginning. I am quoting the last phase. What does it say? May the rain fall in season, may there be a good harvest, may there be well-being in the world, may the ruler be righteous. And the message of this Supreme Court decision is you cannot have economic growth without good governance. And they made that link.